good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's program, we're going to talk about the role of China in Africa's development. For some time now, I can go back even a couple of years ago, people have been talking about the Chinese coming to Africa, enriching themselves, and to the extent that even some people are saying that China is going to enslave Africa again. Come on, stop it, fellows. The idea that China is buying Africa, China is doing this and is going to enslaving Africa in a different form is all nonsense. Let's stop it. Okay? Let's stop that nonsense. Anyway, first of all, this has been going on not because of people in Africa saying it, but mainly coming from the European countries, the Eurozone, as well as America, because they've been talking about the loans that China has been giving to African countries and creating debts for African countries and all of that. Now, let's get this thing straight. Europe and America was built on the backs of slavery, okay? On the backs of Africans being enslaved, as well as ripping Africa off of its natural resources. That is why Europe is rich today. Europe wouldn't be as rich as it is today if not for the enrichment of themselves through Africa's natural resources. Let's get that straight. So I don't want to hear this talk about China coming to Africa and China ripping off Africa and all that nonsense. China is doing what is good for China. Okay? China is coming to Africa because of China's interest in Africa's natural resources, just like Europeans came into Africa. But the difference is that this time the Chinese are coming on a negotiating terms with the Africans. The Europeans came in to colonize us and took the natural resources with their guns, okay, with force, and enslaved our people with force. Even though some of our traditional leaders that time also contributed in terms of the slavery issue by giving up the slaves that they have captured from other tribes and stuff. I'm not going to discuss that issue today. But I'm going to talk about the issue of China in Africa. I remember a couple of years ago, at that time, I think it was the British Prime Minister, Theresa May. She was in office. And I think she had visited Nigeria. I'm not very sure. Maybe if she visited some African countries, and she was trying to convince these African countries about Europeans coming back into Africa in terms of investments and all that stuff. And this talk about China investing in Africa, giving African country loans and stuff, it's been going on in the West. America has been talking about it, and the Europeans have been talking about it. That's all well and good for them. But the issue we have to ask ourselves is this. We have been out of colonization and been independent for the past, an average African country has been independent for the past, let's say, 50 years. Now, our former colonial masters, which is the French, the Germans, the British, and also so on and so forth, they came to Africa to enrich themselves by taking our resources. When they were leaving Africa, when we became independent in Africa, most African countries were not developed. Neither. There was nothing in most African countries. The very rich African countries, most of the development that we have today came after independence. Because most of the colonial masters, all they were interested in was taking the natural resources. So what they did was they just developed the systems that will enable them to take the natural resources and send them to Europe. That's what the French did, and that's what the British did, and that's what the Germans, the Spanish, and all of them, that's what they did. So it wasn't about developing our systems or economies to make our countries better. It was about what they can develop to get their hands on their natural resources and then sending them back to Europe for their own well-being. Now, with the Chinese, what they are doing is they are coming in as investors. They are coming in as investors. Basically, they are coming in to negotiate deals with the African governments. And for some time now, it's been buzzing on the internet, on the social networks, about the Chinese immigrants treating Africans horribly and discriminating and all that stuff. I get all of that. And I agree with you guys on that issue. But I don't blame the Chinese for that. Because remember, the Chinese are coming in to invest. It is up to the African leaders, African governments, to set the tone and to set the rule of law in terms of how the investments that the Chinese are coming in to do is going to be on. The terms of this investment has to be on the African leaders' terms and not on the Chinese terms, because the Chinese have the money. They are coming in with the money, but they also need the resources. So if you look at the terms that have to come in, the terms have to be more favorable to we Africans than the Chinese, because they need the resources, but we need the money and the development. But what have we been doing? Now, if you look at most African countries today, I will talk about, let's say, Zambia. The Zambia people have taken a lot of loans from the Chinese government. And for some reason, they have not been able to pay their loans. So the electrical company of Zambia was taken over by the Chinese government. And they also took over their broadcasting company. And now the Lusaka airport, the main airport of Zambia, is also under the threat of the Chinese government taking over. Now, in this case, for instance, how do you blame the Chinese government for this? The Chinese came in, they gave you money, they invested in these sectors. And these companies that are mentioned are more or less like collateral to the money that was given by the Chinese government. It is up to the government of Zambia to set the terms of the agreement that they had with the Chinese government. But if they didn't set a good term for the people of Zambia, and they messed up, and now the Chinese are going to run these airports, the electrical grid, as well as their broadcasting company, then why do you blame the Chinese? I don't have to blame the Chinese for that. I blame the government of Zambia, because they were the ones who negotiated a bad deal for their country, number one. And two, we have to also remember, most of these countries, the African governments, they are very corrupt. So basically what they do is that they negotiate deals and get kickbacks out of the deals. So these loans that they take from China doesn't go to benefit their countries. They go to benefit their cronies in their various countries. So in the end, they end up defaulting on these loans. So if the Chinese come in and say, look, we gave you $10 billion, $5 billion, $1 billion, and you're supposed to be paying us this amount of interest, and you're not being able to service that interest, the debt, then this is what we have to do. So the Chinese are in there on their own terms and for their own interest that will benefit the people of China. That is why they are in there. They are not in there because they love the Africans or they love the people of Zambia or Angola or South Africa. No, they are there for their interest. So it's up to the African government also to negotiate deals that will benefit their people. That is where we are not doing the right things, because our governments are corrupt, and because they are corrupt, they are negotiating bad deals, because they have to make sure that when they negotiate these deals, they have to get this kickback so that they can give this money to some of their political cronies and their business cronies and their families and all of that. That is where the problem is. The problem is not the Chinese government. So we have to come to the realization that blaming China for investing in Africa is the wrong person you are blaming. We have to blame our governments. They are the ones responsible for setting the tone for the kind of investment that China is coming to our various countries to do. I mean, talking about Zambia, let's also talk about what you call Angola. I mean, the former crook who stole almost all of Angola's natural resources and its money. Dos Santos. He died. I mean, this guy was a fraud. And how long was that guy a president of Angola? And what did that do? Enrich his families, his daughter and his sons and all that stuff. And now the people of Angola, they owe the Chinese government about what, $21 billion that they have to service this debt. Okay, now you talk about South Africa. South Africa is negotiating to get a loan of about $14.5 billion to help the Eskom electrical grid of South Africa. And the Chinese are negotiating with them to give them this money. So if you look at the Chinese, they are coming in with the money. They're going to give you the money because they know what you have in terms of resources, and they know what they can make out of you from those resources, which every business person does. There's nothing wrong with the Chinese coming into Africa with that interest. The problem is that what are the African leaders, what are the African governments doing to preserve their interest, to make sure that the deals that they make with China benefit the people of their countries? That is where the problem is. That is where the problem is. Because we Africans, we need private foreign investment. The only way Africa can become developed, read my lips on this issue, the only way Africa can become developed is through private foreign investment. Simple, and that is it. We are not going to become economically, socially, infrastructurally developed with donor loans from former colonial masters, IMF and World Bank. It ain't happening. Let's get that into our heads to understand that our only way forward in terms of development, economically, infrastructurally, and socially, and everything has to do with private foreign investments. And that is what the Chinese are coming in with. But unfortunately for us, we are negotiating bad deals because of our corrupt governments. So bear in mind, we should stop blaming the Chinese that they are putting too much debt on Africa. They are doing this to Africa. Stop it. Okay? Let's stop making those points against the Chinese. The Chinese are doing what is good in their interest. Okay, we Africans have to do what is good in our own interest for our citizens. That is where we have fallen short. That is where our corrupt, fraudulent leaders have fallen short because of their own selfish interest. Their selfish interest to enrich themselves. So they are not looking at the interest of its people and its citizens of their countries, but rather at their own selfish interest for themselves, their cronies, and their families. And that is why we are having these problems. So let me make this point again. What is wrong with China bringing money to Africa? It is all right for China to send money to Europe. All right, you hear from the Europeans talking about all this debt that China is putting on African countries and all that stuff. But let's not forget, 2008, during the financial crisis, 2008, during the financial crisis, America was the first Western country, developed country, to come out of the financial crisis. And I remember very well, the United States government and the states were advertising. They were advertising for the Chinese to come and buy houses in America. Okay, I'm not making this up. This is a fact. As a matter of fact, I know of a big-time real estate dealer who I know of who sold about 10 houses to Chinese that was worth more than $1 million each. Some of them as much as $5 million in the state of Maryland. And the reason was that in America, if you invest over 500,000, back in the day, it used to be 330,000 or so. But now it's about 500,000. If you invest 500,000 in an American economy, either you're going to buy a house worth over 500,000, or you come and open a restaurant or whatever, any investment totaling over 500,000 in America, you are entitled to apply for what you call a green card because of that investment that you have put into the American economy. So a lot of these Chinese were coming, those with money, came to America in 2008 during the economic downturn when house prices and the economy was not doing very well. The whole world economy was doing very bad in 2008. These Chinese came in, those with money, bought real estate in a lot of American states. And they bought them because some of them used that to get their green cards and eventually become citizens of the United States, because some of these rich families from China, they want to bring their children to schools in America anyway. So when you have a green card and eventually become a citizen, it's a very easy way for you to have your children enrolled in universities in this country. So a lot of these Chinese took advantage of this program that has been going on forever, but especially after 2000, during the 2008 economic crisis around the world. So if it is good for America and the Americans, the states, to somehow invite Chinese individuals to come and invest in the American economy, why is it bad for Africa to also have Chinese money flow into Africa? That is the question we have to ask ourselves. Okay, so let's not buy into this old divide and conquer narrative where the Western media is making it seem like, oh, the Chinese are wrong for Africa in the sense that because they are coming there and they are creating debts. No. The Chinese are not wrong. They have money and they are bringing it into Africa. It is the African governments who are negotiating bad deals. So it's not the Chinese government or the Chinese citizens who are investing in Africa. It is the African governments you have to blame. I'm going to touch on the other topic of discrimination and all that stuff. I'm going to talk about, but let me finish with this one now. 2, you go to England. Go and look. A lot of the Chinese investments in England, they love it. Okay, as far as it's coming to them, it's okay. You go to Germany. Who do you think is number one trading partner of China in Europe? It's Germany. Where do they sell all their Audis, their Porsches, their Ferraris? They sell it to the Chinese because the rich Chinese are the ones buying them. Okay, so it's all right. But you know why they are able to say that? Because in Europe, because the economies are not corrupt, their governments are not corrupt, they are able to put in place good trading deals with the Chinese. So the investments that the Chinese are making in Europe, it goes to benefit their economies. Unlike Africa, because our governments are corrupt, that is the key. The key to our problem with the Chinese money coming to Africa is because we have corrupt, fraudulent, bad governments. That is why we are having problem with the Chinese investments. It's not because the Chinese are the ones saddling us and our children with debts. It is our leaders, because our leaders are crooks. So they go into these deals with China because they have to get their kickbacks. Okay, they have to do these fraudulent deals to get their kickbacks, and then and give the money to some of their cronies, their families and friends and political cronies and all that stuff. So that is one area also. Now, the second area is this, because I'm talking about how much Chinese money is also going into Europe and American companies. I already talked about the 2008, the housing market, where Chinese people brought a lot of money into America, Europe, buying houses and all that stuff. Now, let me talk about the U.S. government. The U.S. government sells bonds, treasury bills and bonds and all that stuff. That's what most governments do to raise money and all that stuff. Do you know the number one holder of U.S. bills? The number one holder of U.S. bills are the Chinese government. Is the Chinese government. Number 2 is Japan. Number 3 is South Korea, Germany, and no. But the US doesn't say the Chinese are bad people or the Chinese government is bad, so don't buy our bills or bonds. But the US takes it. And why does the Chinese buy the US bills? The Chinese buy it because they believe in the American economic system. That is why they buy it. Because prior to about 15, 20 years ago, the Japanese were the number one holder of US bills. Okay, and as China became more developed and started making a lot of money, the Chinese took over, went ahead of the Japanese. So that's the reason why. So these Chinese the US bills that the Chinese government, the Asians, Japanese, the South Koreans, all these countries all over the world are buying, They are buying because they believe in the American economic system. So they are investing in the American economic system. That's the same money that the American government uses to build its economy. Okay, so if the Chinese money coming into the US bonds and bills, treasuries, is good, then why is it bad for Africa? This is the point. You see, this is the point I want you people to understand. That the problem with China's investment in Africa is not because of Chinese trying to saddle the Africans with debt. It's because of our bad leaders in Africa who are corrupt. So they get these loans and they don't use these loans to benefit our economies. And in the end, we end up like what is going on in Zambia right now, where now the Chinese have to control they are getting ready to control their Lusaka airport. They already control the electrical grid and then the broadcasting company. And then you look at what they call it, another country like Angola, and then you look at also South Africa. South Africa is already making a deal with China for in terms of the electrical grid, the ESCOM, to get about $14.5 billion from China. So it's up to the South Africa government to negotiate a good deal on that and put that money into the electrical grid to create revenue to help build the economy so that they can be able to pay that loan. Because Africa don't need donor countries. Okay, we don't need handouts. Go and beg, because that is not going to develop a country. The only way to develop our countries is through private foreign investments. So I love to see the private foreign investment coming from all over the world. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from China, India, Japan, America. It doesn't matter. As far as our leaders are going to negotiate good deals that they are going to negotiate and also not to be corrupt to the extent of using these loans to benefit themselves and their colonies and their families. If we do what we are supposed to do in a rightful way, then I bet you fellows, we are not going to have problem with this issue. This is the part 1 of this program. I'm going to come back with part 2. So tune in. We are not done yet. Okay. I want to make this real short right now, but I'm going to come back with part 2. But anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. If it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk, and we're going to talk about part 2, hopefully next weekend. So you guys have a great week.